All right, everyone. So we're in our third lecture on externalities, and we're going to be wrapping it up today. So if you remember, guys, the last lecture we left off looking at the case of an external benefit. So we started with looking at an external cost, and we looked at a Pigouvian tax, and then we moved on to external benefit and a Pigouvian subsidy, but we had to rush through that pretty quickly. So let's start there and do it again, just to make sure that everyone has good notes and you're totally following this, okay? So, our example, let's assume that good X results in a positive externality. So good X results in a positive externality. And so remember, what's another word for positive externality?
Spillover benefit.
Spillover benefit or external benefit, right? So positive externality, external benefit, spillover benefit, all the same thing. So let's start with our graph. And those of you that are drawing these teeny tiny graphs, you need to stop. You're not going to be able to follow your own notes if you don't draw nice big graphs. So guys, paper is cheap. We're not really saving trees when we don't use paper, because we've got, it's like saying don't eat corn and save the corn stalks, right? It's an agricultural commodity. So let's use some paper. All right. Let's give ourselves a downward sloping demand curve. And just for ease of presentation, let's continue with our assumption that we have a constant cost supply curve. So for right now, we're going to assume a horizontal constant cost supply curve. So everyone agree then, we know that the market is operating at Q0 with a price of P0, right? So that's where the market is operating. But we also know that we have a positive externality, guys. So remind me, which way do we normally draw marginal benefits? Do marginal benefits normally increase, or are they usually diminishing? Diminishing, right? Law of diminishing marginal benefits, right? So let's go ahead and retain that. Diminishing marginal benefits. But again, these are marginal external benefits. So let's draw it in like this. Make sure it crosses that dotted line. All right? So we have a marginal external benefit curve. We can say it even diminishes to 0. Let's draw it in like that. So of course, we want to make very clear that we're assuming that we can estimate the marginal external benefits. And as I said, that's not necessarily an easy thing to do, but people do study this, right? People study this. So assume we can estimate the marginal external benefit curve. So we've labeled it. Now, we know where the market's operating. We said the market operates at P0 and Q0. But what do we know? Is that going to be the efficient or socially optimal level? Is that going to be efficient or socially optimal? No, because of the presence of the externality. So we want to determine, we want to find the efficient, or another way of saying that, socially optimal level. All right, so let's think about what we need to do here. Remember, I said that it's much easier if you'll remember that a demand curve is simply the sum of the marginal benefits. What kind of marginal benefits, guys? Whose marginal benefits? The marginal benefits to the demanders, right? To the consumers. So we would think about these as being private marginal benefits. So if I'm a demander, what we're saying is my demand is a function of my private marginal benefits, right? That's where my marginal willingness to pay comes from, my private marginal benefits. All right. But do we agree that this demand curve doesn't incorporate the marginal external benefits, right? So this is a review. Everyone understands this, right? So in my decision process, when I'm deciding if I'm going to be a demander of something, I'm not incorporating those spillover benefits to others. So when I think about getting an immunization, I usually don't say, wow, I like Xavier and Madison and Ryan and Alexa, and I don't want to get them sick. So I should get more immunizations and be willing to pay more. I don't think that way, right? All right, so remind me, guys, what do we need to do to find the efficient or socially optimal level? We need to think about both what? Jason, help me out here. Jason?
I'm not sure what you're asking.
What do I need to do? I want to find the efficient level or the socially optimal level.
P1, Q1?
Okay, I want to find P1, Q1, but that doesn't help me. That's what I'm asking you to help me do.
Oh, you do the same distance from marginal external benefit to Q, then you add it to supply.
Okay, is that right? Am I going to take the marginal external benefits and add it to supply? I want to add it to what? Demand. Good. So think about what we're doing, guys. We are basically saying that we want to find the social demand curve, right? And that social demand curve is going to be the sum of the marginal benefits that are private plus the marginal external benefits, the spillover benefits, right? I want to find that social demand curve. So that social demand curve is equal to the demand curve that I have on my graph plus the marginal external benefits. So that's my step one, right? I need to find the social demand curve. Does everyone understand why I have to add benefits to benefits and costs to costs, right? Remember that this supply curve captures the industry's marginal cost. So does it make sense to add marginal benefits on top of marginal costs? Does that really make intuitive sense? No. So you got to think intuitively. Add apples to apples and oranges to oranges. All right. So now we know what we need to do. How do we go about doing this, CJ?
You measure from the quantity to the height of the MEB.
Okay, so I want to measure the height of the marginal external benefit curve and add it to what?
The demand curve.
The demand curve. And I want to be precise. It's a little bit hard to do here on this screen, but on a test, guys, you're going to need to be precise. Now, guys, what do I know about this point right here where the marginal external benefit curve falls to 0? What do I know about that point right there? What's the implication there? Okay, it's going to be where my social demand curve connects to my normal demand curve, right? It's going to be where they converge, right? There's no more marginal external benefit to add. So I need to do this in a few places and derive this curve accurately. So on a test, you're going to need to have some probably straight edge or maybe a cheap ruler or something, and don't just kind of eyeball it. I need to see some precision. Xavier.
Can we just, I know this needs to be precise, but can we just draw like the lines, that the height, and put at A equals A, so like label A at the bottom, and put A at the top, and then
I mean, you can label it however you want, but I want to still see some precision. Okay? I want to be able to see that, one, you know what you're doing, and you've done it right, and you've done it carefully. I mean, it might be difficult to get it exactly right, but I want to, you'll be amazed at some ugly graphs that I see, and I just want to see that you know what you're doing, and if you're just kind of randomly adding distances, then you don't know what you're doing, right? So now I need to try to draw in my social demand curve. So does everyone agree this is D social? You agree with that right there? That's my demand curve, social demand curve. And then it really kind of continues to follow along on the demand curve. So this is where they join, where there's no more external benefits that I can add in. Okay. Now we're trying to find the efficient level. We've done this. So step one, Now what do I need to do? Now what do I need to do? How do I find the socially optimal price and quantity? Kristen.
It's where they meet at the bottom, right?
It's where what meets?
The desocial and supply, or, no.
Are you sure? Katie? How do I find the efficient level? How did I do it for the market? How did I find efficiency, or the equilibrium level? It's not efficient in this case, but the equilibrium for the market. Demand equals supply, right? Intersection, demand equals supply. So don't I need something like that? Doesn't it have to be some variant of demand equals supply, right? If I want to find where lines cross, that's got to be some version of demand equals supply. So, CJ?
Isn't it desocial with S?
So I need to take my social demand curve and set it equal to the supply curve. So does everyone know what point we're describing with that? We're describing this point right here. All right, everyone agree? We're describing point E. So that tells us that the efficient quantity is really higher than what the market's going to generate. The market generates Q0, but the efficient quantity is Q1. And of course, because we have a horizontal supply curve, price isn't changing. What if I had an upward sloping supply curve? What would happen to price if my supply curve was upward sloping? Price would go which way? Price would go up, right? Price would go up. Good. All right. So guys, do we have market failure? Do we have market failure?
Yes.
Graham, do we have market failure?
Yes.
How do you know?
Because the efficient level isn't where the first one was.
Okay, be a little more precise. Say it more precisely.
The quantity produced is going to be like higher.
The quantity produced is going to be higher. Be
Or
precise.
You,
Tell me precisely. How do we know we have market failure here, guys? How do we know?
The market's not functioning at the efficient
Say it again,
level.
Mary Elizabeth.
The market's not functioning.
The market's not functioning at the efficient level. Prove it to me. Be precise. Tell me how we know that. Because for all I know on a test, you've memorized that. How do I know it? Tell me about the graph. This is what I mean. Tie your answers to the graph. So you know what you're answering. You're on the right track. So tell me, how do you know? How are you going to tell me on a test? Yeah, we have market failure, and I can prove it to you.
Because they're not producing enough.
Okay, be precise. Tell me about the graph. Tie your answer to the graph. Madison?
Because the market is operating at Q0 and P0
Okay.
needs to be operating at Q1.
So the market is operating at Q0, but the socially efficient level, socially optimal level, is Q1. So Q1, the efficient level is greater than Q0, and you need to be able to tell me what's what. So you've got to be, that's what I mean by tying your answers to the graph. So Mary Elizabeth, you absolutely had it right. But all I want you to do is say, and I can show you on the graph. Everybody with me? So be precise. Help me know that you get this. So yeah, we have market failure. How do we know? Because Q1 is the socially optimal or efficient level. And Q0 is where the market is going to operate. So what's the nature of the market failure here, folks? The market is doing what? The market is over-allocating or under-allocating?
Under.
Yeah, the market is under-allocating. So if I ask you about the nature of the market failure, basically ask them what direction. What direction is it? Oops, sorry. All right. So everyone agree we have market failure because we have a spillover benefit present. Now what if I ask you to explain intuitively why it's happening. What's causing this? Do I want you to say, well, Q0's there and Q1's here, and is that what I'm asking? Intuitively, what is causing this? Intuitively, what is causing this? Sandy, intuitively, what's causing this?
The market can't internalize the externality.
Okay, the market can't internalize the externality. It's a good place to start. Is that overly intuitive? We're on the right track, but you haven't really explained what that means and why the market can't internalize. So Ryan, what is causing this? It is true. So Sandy's got us started. The market isn't internalizing this externality. I don't really know what that means. You're talking to somebody outside of this class. So I'm not sure they're going to understand that. Explain, Ryan.
Not internalizing. I really don't know where to go.
Would a better
Okay.
way to be to say it doesn't incorporate marginal external benefits? Is that
Okay,
what
that's
you're-
basically the same thing we just said. It
Yeah,
doesn't
pretty much the
incorporate
same
marginal
thing.
external benefits. I like that better, okay? But I don't feel like that's very intuitive. And you're sitting at the table with the scientists. They don't really know what you're talking about. They don't necessarily have a background in economics. So explain to them. How you know, Madison?
Because people aren't thinking about, like, if you did like flu shots, like they're not thinking about the fact that it's also helping others around them.
Okay.
So
stop there for a second. So people are making decisions on the basis of their what? Private interest, right? Private marginal benefit and private marginal cost. And what they're not thinking about is the spillover cost to others. Do people make decisions about what to consume, how much to pay based on spillover benefits? No. So let's go back to the statement that Sandy said. Sandy said the market can't internalize the externality. What are we really saying by that? What are we really saying by that? Brandon?
Is it because it's impacting like things outside of the market?
Okay, because it's impacting things outside of the market.
All costs are not accounted for.
Well, these are benefits,
Oh,
not all
benefits,
costs,
yeah.
but okay, not all benefits are accounted for, but you haven't really told me why.
people aren't willing to think about like helping others without.
People aren't thinking about others. Can the market change that? Can the market force you to think about externalities in your decision?
Yes.
Can it force you to pay more because there's benefits that spill over to others when I get immunized? The market can't force me to think about those things, right? There's no mechanism by which the market can change my decision process, right? So, how do we change people's decision process? The market can't do it. We have market failure. We can't change the way that people think. The market can't. So how do we change the way people think?
Subsidy?
In this case, maybe a subsidy. A subsidy. Okay? If I give people a subsidy, now am I influencing the way they think? Sure, but is that the market? It's not the market. Does everyone understand that distinction? The market's not giving the subsidy. Government's giving the subsidy. All right. So let's move on to talk about then imposing a Pigouvian subsidy. Now remember, we have a specific definition for a Pigouvian subsidy. All right, let's redraw what we have so your notes aren't too messy. So everyone, I'm going to draw the graph and you're going to answer the questions. So the first thing, let me put in a marginal external benefit curve. All right. So I want you to find the market outcome. I want you to find the efficient, or I might call it the socially optimal outcome. So do that. I want to see everyone working. right, so everyone has labeled their market, right? The market's going to operate at Q0 and P0, right? Then has everyone derived their social demand curve? How do I derive a social demand curve? I add what to what? I add marginal external benefits to the supply curve or to the demand curve, guys? Which one do I add it to? I add marginal external benefit to what? I need to add the marginal external benefit and the demand curve. And when I do that, that gives me what? The social demand curve, right? And then I need to set the social demand curve equal to the supply curve to find the equilibrium point, right? So I have precisely, didn't leave myself quite enough room here. Let's do that somewhere else. All right, so we should have something like that. All right, everyone has labeled, right? So now, can I find my efficient point right here? Does everyone agree this is the point where the social demand equals the supply curve, right? So I'm describing the point of intersection, which means Q1 is right here. Do I have market failure? Yes. What did we say? The market is under-allocating. All right. So now what we want to do is impose a Pigouvian subsidy. And I remember that a Pigouvian subsidy is basically defined as the optimal subsidy so that the market is going to operate at the efficient level. So I'm setting the optimal subsidy to force the market to behave efficiently, to bring us to the socially optimal level. Now remind me, guys, if a supply curve captures marginal cost, what's a subsidy doing? Is it raising marginal cost or is it lowering marginal cost? It's lowering marginal cost, right? If we subsidize, we're lowering marginal cost. So we're going to assume we're going to subsidize the producers of something so that we get more of it, all right? Can we find the optimal subsidy? Can everyone find the optimal subsidy? We need the supply curve to lower. What point are we trying to get to, folks? It's got to be along the demand curve, right? Does that blue demand curve exist in the market? Is that blue demand curve? Can the market operationalize along that blue demand curve? It can't do anything with that blue demand curve. That's an abstraction. So it needs to operate on the demand curve. So we want to be at that purple point right there. Everyone agree? So now do I know how much to lower the marginal cost? Sure. So if I label my subsidy is going to be that vertical distance. Why do I have to measure it vertically? Remind me. Why am I measuring it vertically? Because it's a tax? I don't like that answer. Because it's a subsidy. You're right. Because it's a subsidy, but that doesn't tell me anything. Why am I measuring it vertically, guys? Because it's a...
Assumed horizontally constant.
Because it's constant? No. Constant simply means this is going to be a parallel shift, right? Because it's going to change the price. Guys, look at this graph. How many dimensions do we have on this graph? We have 2 dimensions. What are they? Dollars and quantity. I only have 2 dimensions. Vertically, we measure dollars, right? And horizontally, we measure quantity. A subsidy has to be which one? Is it a dollar measure or is it a quantity measure? It's a dollar measure, right? So just basic geometry tells me if I'm measuring the subsidy, it's got to be measured against the dollar axis. Vertically. You with me? Does that make sense? So I've now got my subsidy So we can label this supply plus the subsidy. Has this moved us to the efficient level? Okay, it has. Now, what else did we learn about Pigouvian taxes and Pigouvian subsidies? Let's take a look. What do we know about this distance right here? What do we know about that distance?
That's the amount that's how much you get paid.
That's the amount of the subsidy, but I want to know, why is that the amount of the subsidy?
The distance from P0 to P1 or P2.
Okay, it is the change in the vertical axis, but that's not what I'm asking. Why? How does it connect to the marginal external benefit?
It's just based on the magnitude.
Everyone agree that geometrically it has to be equal to that distance, right? Because we took the marginal external benefit and we stacked it on top. Everyone agree? So do you agree that the subsidy is equal to the size of the marginal external benefit at Q1, the efficient level? Everyone agree with that? Everyone agree with that? Do you see that geometrically? That is really important to understand. We know that a Pigouvian subsidy is defined as being equal in magnitude to the size of the marginal external benefit being generated at the efficient level. So guys, back to that example about speeding from your Pigouvian tax to rich article. Of course, that's a tax. This is a subsidy. But the tax works the same way, right? A Pigouvian tax has to be equal to the marginal external cost at the efficient level. But yet they're taxing this guy because he's rich. They're taxing him a lot because he's rich. Is that Pigouvian? No, because we just showed that Pigouvian taxes and subsidies have to reflect the magnitude of the externality at Q1 or Q star, whatever we label it, the efficient level. You with me there? Does that make sense? All right. So the market can't make this happen, but we can use regulation, tax, subsidy to get markets to behave more efficiently, right? You need to be able to intuitively explain that. Now, the last case I want us to look at is this. Let's say that good Y generates an external benefit. Good Y generates an external benefit. And I'm giving you a graph like this. All right, I want you to take a look at this scenario. I want to know, do we have market failure? I want you to prove it. Whatever your answer is, prove it. So I want to see your work. Do we have market failure? Take a minute and figure out how you might answer that.
So you're going to give us the original marginal external benefits?
Well, I don't know what I'm going to give you. Depends. I mean, it depends on the particular question. I don't know. I would be prepared to draw it yourself if I ask you to, and that means you need to remember that marginal external benefits diminish, and you would need to draw it correctly. So I would know my graphs well enough, just in case. So I want you to take a look at this. How am I going to go about answering this question? What should you do first? What should you do first, guys? Find the what? Find what equilibrium? Yeah, so I'd probably start by finding the market equilibrium. And so the market's going to be operating at P0 and Q0, where supply equals demand. So now find the efficient or socially optimal level. So how do I do this? Find the efficient or socially optimal level. I need to find what? The social demand curve, right? Which is the demand curve plus the marginal external benefit. So everyone find that. So did you end up with a social demand curve that looks like mine? Do they cross? Does it cross or does it converge? Yeah, they converge, right? When that marginal external benefit, so if you drew yours crossing, that would be wrong, right? For them to cross, what would have to happen to this marginal external benefit? It would have to become negative, which makes it a marginal external bad, right? So that would be kind of a weird scenario. So let's erase that right here. So they don't cross, right? Because essentially, make sure you understand what this marginal external benefit curve is doing. It's falling to zero, right? When it falls to zero, it basically goes like that. Everyone agree? So what's interesting about this? What's interesting about this situation? Brandon? There's no market failure. How do you know?
Because the market's already at equilibrium.
Okay, the market's at equilibrium. Okay, so what's the socially optimal price? P0. Good. What's the socially optimal quantity? Q0. All right. So we have a situation where this externality doesn't result in market failure, right? So we have no market failure in this example. How does it differ from the previous example? What's causing this to give us a different result? Ryan?
The demand social, it converges.
Okay.
Demand.
The social demand curve converges with the demand curve, but it did it on the other graph too. It just does it where?
It crosses.
Benefits diminish before
The
Q0.
benefits, the marginal external benefits are diminishing before we get to the market outcome, right? So what does this tell us? Do all externalities result in market failure?
No.
No, not necessarily. Right? Not necessarily.
Do you have an example of this?
Do I have an example of this?
Like in real life?
Well, I mean, not necessarily. I mean, it could be that a marginal external benefit's really small or diminishes quickly. Years ago, we used to have this bakery in town called Terry's Bakery, and they had this glass front storefront with a fan, and it blew the beautiful, wonderful smelling donut scent out to the street and created these external benefits. Should we regulate that now everyone has to eat more donuts? Should we be subsidizing Terry's Bakery to make more donuts, make more smell? No, not all externalities generate market failure. They're either too small or they diminish quickly enough where it doesn't distort the market and its ability to be socially optimal or efficient. All right, last thing we're going to do. So Lexi asked, do we have to have a horizontal supply curve? No. So let's move on to look at what happens when we change our supply curve to be upward sloping. So make sure you see what we're doing here. We're going to move to an upward upward sloping supply curve. All right. And let's do the same example. Let's assume that good Z generates a positive externality. Now assume, I'm not going to trick you unless I draw the graph for you. If you do this, you need to draw an external benefit that's not inframarginal. By the way, just so we have some language, we call this an inframarginal externality. Inframarginal externality, special case.
We need to know that term.
Do you need to know that? Possibly. Inframarginal externality. Everyone have that? Inframarginal externality. So when I draw this, I need to make sure that I'm not accidentally drawing an inframarginal externality, right? If you're drawing in your marginal external benefit curve, don't accidentally draw one that is an inframarginal externality, because you're not going to get market failure and then you're going to be really confused. What happened? I'm not getting the right answer. So let's put in a marginal external benefit curve that looks like this.
Is there a reason that you don't put it all the way to 0? Does it matter? If you
No,
do it-
but I might on a test. You never know. You
So-
need to draw it correctly.
Well, so are they both correct? Like, I know if you don't put it to 0, you measure the distance and then measure the distance on the demand curve.
I mean, I could extrapolate that it's heading to 0, right? I mean,
Yeah. Okay. I'm
so
just curious.
yeah, I'm not trying to trick you or anything.
Okay.
But I've put it into 0. I may not, but you can extrapolate.
Yeah.
All right. So guys, same thing. I want everyone to determine if there's market failure. So everyone figure that out. So do we have market failure? So take a couple minutes and figure that out. So by now you know what to do here. Show me the market failure on the graph. So at this point, you should know what to do, but remember, you're finding the market outcome. And you're finding the efficient or socially optimal outcome. So everyone agree the market is operating at Q0 and P0. Everyone agree with that? All right, has everyone found their social demand curve? All right, so we found our social demand curve by vertically adding. Okay, so nothing has changed there. Right, so everyone found this socially optimal demand curve. So now, can you find the efficient price and quantity? Everyone agree that we want to be at that output level right here, Q1? And price would be what? P1. Everyone agree with that? So the socially optimal level is Q1 and P1. So what's different about this versus the previous way we drew it with the constant cost supply curve? Price, now we're able to see that price should change. Price should be higher when this involves an external benefit. So now, how do we address this? We're going to impose a what? Okay, so let's impose a subsidy. keeping in mind that a subsidy is a supply curve is a marginal cost curve, right? So which way is the subsidy moving our supply curve? Everyone agree it's going to shift downward? And we said in class that we're going to keep it simple. We're going to use a simple constant subsidy per unit, right? $2 per unit, first unit, $2, second unit, third unit, fourth unit, $2, right? So what do I know when I shift my supply curve? It needs to be a what shift? Downward shift that is parallel, right? Parallel, okay? Where am I trying to get to? Q1, but it's got to be along the demand curve, right? Because people operate on the demand curve. People operate based on private marginal benefits. Everyone agree with that? So my supply curve, is going to shift in this direction. How do I label the subsidy? If I asked you to show me the subsidy, where is it? How would I label the subsidy, guys? Where's the subsidy on this graph? Okay, but I can label it anywhere, right? I can label it anywhere. What's the size of the subsidy over here? Can you see that? What's the amount of the subsidy over here?
0.
It's 0? Come on, guys. You just shifted a supply curve. How did you know how much to shift the supply? What does the shift in the supply curve mean in this case? Y'all are just memorizing stuff, guys. You better understand this intuitively. And if you don't understand theory of subsidies and taxes, you better go watch the lectures in the micro review section. How do I label the subsidy? Does it matter where I label it? Is it the same everywhere? Is it the same for each unit?
Yes.
What do you mean you think so? You should be able to look at this and know so.
Yeah, because it's the same.
Because the amount we shifted it is the same everywhere. So isn't that the amount of the subsidy right there? That vertical distance? And what about that right there? Isn't that the amount of the subsidy? And why does this have to be a horizontal shift?
Because price is on the horizontal side.
Okay, I need to measure it vertically.
Up and down.
Why does it have to be parallel? Why does it have to be a parallel shift?
Because it's affecting price.
Because it's affecting, but why does it have to be parallel? Because we said the subsidy is the same for every unit, right? So we're going to have a constant subsidy, right? So if the subsidy is $2, it's $2 on every single unit. Doesn't that decrease the marginal cost by the same amount at every single unit, guys? So when I ask you to tell me where the subsidy is, it's the vertical distance between those two lines, and it doesn't matter where I show it, right? Because it's the same. Everybody with me? Does that make sense? All right. We do need to remember, however, that this distance right here is equal to that distance. So we've now imposed a subsidy. What if we were imposing a tax? Of course, that would be the case of an external cost. What would we do with the supply curve? We would do what? Shift it up vertically. So guys, did it matter whether my supply curve was horizontal or upward sloping? Do I answer the questions the same way? Yeah. The only difference is, as Madison says, it allows me to look at the price change, right? And here, price theoretically should be higher if there's an external benefit involved. Guys, you've got to know how to work with these graphs, all right? So study hard and read your announcements after class today. All right, have a great weekend.
So no class Tuesday, right?